Hi guys, Ray from Whimsical Pictures here. Long time no see, as usual. But today I wanted to wrap up a readathon I participated in last weekend. Uh, this is Bizarre Individuals 24-hour manga readathon. I believe it was hosted by him, Jin Graves, and Lindsay Tutt. I will put the names and the channels of all of the hosts down below, so check them out for sure. But basically, this was just a 24-hour period to just read manga. It was very chill. You could basically start and stop when you wanted to. For me, I actually participated a day later. I did not participate on Saturday, but on Sunday, because living on the other side of the world, I did want my readathon to cross over as much as possible with the other people participating, because it's not very fun to participate in a readathon alone. So, and that ended up working out well. For most of the readathon, I was reading and participating alongside other people and was able to sort of keep up with what everyone was reading on Twitter, and it was very fun. And today I just want to kind of wrap up the books I read. I think I enjoyed everything I read, at least to some extent, so that's good. I read 5 books. 5 books. 2 of them were omnibuses. 2 of them were in Japanese. So I think I did pretty well. I'm not the fastest reader in the world, so that's pretty good for me, especially considering I did read some fairly dense content, which we'll get into. But yeah, we've got my coffee because it's cold outside. Finally, here in southwestern Japan, the cold has finally reached us. You can see that the footprints have appeared on the Marauders map. And let's go. Now, the first book I read in the morning is going to be the hardest book for me to wrap up. This is such a weird book. And there's so much I have to explain about it, but yeah, we're gonna try. I wanted to start with an English book to get things started, like, not too difficult. But the content here is hardly easy to read. So, I don't know how well that worked. I actually read part of it in the morning, and then I went to Starbucks, and I didn't want to read it in public. So I read the rest of it later. But I did enjoy it. I knew I would. I'm a fan of this author and illustrator. But you know, let's just get into it. So this is Super Dimensional Love Gun by Shintaro Kago. It says bizarre manga artist. That is definitely true. So this book, first of all, it is adults only. You can see it's actually published by Faku. If you don't know that publisher, they publish hentai in the US. This is the first book I've bought from them. I really respect them as a publisher, even if I'm not the world's biggest reader of hentai, at least straight hentai. Whoops. And it's not the type of books that I'm interested in collecting most of the time. So since I do respect them a lot as a small publisher, and I respect how they interact with their fan base and consumer base, and I respect the quality of their publications a lot, and their passion for what they publish, I am glad that I finally had sort of a reason to purchase one of their books. This is one of 2 Kago books that's been released in English recently. It's his first time being published in English. This is from Fantagraphics. This is the book I would recommend if you're just starting with Kago, because this book's content isn't pornographic in nature. It's just as weird and has sort of the same style as this, with, like, sort of body horror elements and almost a satirical situation, always sort of starting kind of normal and then getting crazier and crazier and crazier until like there's this punchline at the end that is like usually both funny and horrifying at the same time. And far beyond anything you could have imagined happening at the start of the story. This is dealing a lot with issues of the elderly, and the growing elderly population, the aging population in Japan. It's about sort of a homemaid. This girl is a homemaid for the elderly, and she wants to be the highest rated homemaid in her company. But because she's so good at her job, she's got people who are jealous of her, and they keep throwing her at weird and disturbing home situations that are sometimes supernatural in nature and sometimes just plain weird. There is a chapter in this book dealing with zombie dentures, which was one of my favorite chapters, I think. It was so funny. But that's where I recommend you start. Today we're talking about this one, which is pornographic in its content. It's called the Pretty Girls Collection. It's like a whole bunch of stories by him published in all kinds of different magazines. All centering around the theme of like pretty girls. And yeah, where do I even start? Nothing is off limits here. Absolutely nothing. There's one story about a guy with a cannibalism fetish who keeps trying to convince the girl he likes to eat him. There's one that was really funny, actually, in its absurdity, that's like based around the sort of false idea that a girl's mouth will change shape to resemble the shape of her partner's bits, who she's been blowing. And then it just like, it starts with just like, oh, his thing must be big, his thing must be small. But then the mouth shapes get gradually weirder and like Tetris-y, and you're like, what is happening? And there's one that's about this girl who finds a club with a skin irritation fetish, and that has a really disturbing and disgusting conclusion. It's a lot. It's a whole lot. So a lot of the chapters are exploring a different, just sort of gross idea, or like a weird, like body horror concept, a fetish, a sex joke, like that one about, you know, your mouth coming to resemble what you've been putting your mouth on. And a lot of the time it works. If you're into these kinds of jokes, if you're into this kind of really intense body horror content, it's really entertaining. It's really funny. Most of the stories don't really have any kind of point to make, hence the nonsense in Eroguro nonsense, I guess. If you want more of a social point, I would read this one. Or Shortcuts by Usamaru Furuya is another good one for sort of using the style of Eroguro nonsense to actually make like a salient point. But this one's mostly just wacky and bizarre and disturbing. There are a couple stories, and this is where we get into the part that I'm not so sure about. There are a couple stories that I think betray Kago's worldview a little more than I like. So, and I think that it's more so out of this concept that nothing is off limits, which includes offensive stereotypes, which includes, controversial topics. But the fact that he's so determined to not be political in this means that he's not dealing with those topics in a way that I think is responsible. There is one story in particular that was funny, but it's about abortion, and it ends up painting women who enjoy sex as being pitiful, as being wasteful, as being having no point to their lives, as being stupid, as being nothing more than men's playthings, which is it's offensive. It's not a good look, you know? And it's like, looking at women getting too many abortions or whatever, and like not even stopping to consider why, for example, young women in Japan tend to go to abortion as their first option rather than relying on birth control, which there are so many reasons for that are worth in-depth exploration. And I would assume that this guy's just not thought about it, There's another one where I don't even know what this story was. It was just like, what are the first two things you think of when you think of India? Curry and like samsara. So it's just like wheels, and it's like everything's made out of curry. And it gets really offensive. There's not really any reason for it. Like, it follows the same patterns as the others, but it's like, what are you saying about Indian people? Like, I know you're probably not trying to say anything about Indian people, but you kind of are, There's no such thing as apolitical art, right? Even the stance of wanting to be apolitical is a political statement. So, yeah, I liked this book overall, but I think I ended up giving it maybe 3 or 3.5 stars because, as with any collection of stories, it's hit or miss. And, yeah. But even more so just because the content is so inherently offensive, and shocking. So, yeah, this is definitely not for everyone, but if you're a fan of his illustrations and you're a fan of Araguro nonsense, I would recommend giving it a shot. If you are not, do not. Do not. Start here. Start here. This one. This one right here. Don't start here. This is not the place to start. This is the place to go after you start. Okay, went on about that one for far too long. Second book, we're getting into the Moto Hagio special hour here. I finished this one. I read the first few stories a while ago, and I just got busy and never finished it. This is called Nanohana, which is a type of flower, and it is Moto Hagio's response to the Fukushima disaster on March 11th, 2011. And basically, the first chapter and the last chapter are a framing story about a girl who lives in Fukushima after the disaster. The first story, I think, is my favorite, which is about this girl learning about Chernobyl and eventually meeting, essentially, her alternate self, her cosmic twin, in Chernobyl. And this one was really interesting and moving, and it's about like reincarnation, and it's about the cycles of history repeating themselves, and it's about love and relationships across time and space, that's definitely a theme that Moto Hagio loves to explore. She loves that. She loves twins. So I enjoyed that story a lot. The middle 3 stories are fantasy stories personifying radioactive elements like plutonium and uranium as people. And they're really conceptual pieces about what's so alluring about these elements. My favorite one of these was a retelling of the Oscar Wilde play Salome. Here, which portrays this sort of radioactive element in a more sympathetic light and also has probably the best art in the volume. And then the last chapter is sort of ties things together, and it's very sweet. It's more about this girl's grandmother passing on. And it has this really good, like, parallel between, like, the passing of her grandmother and Night on the Galactic Railroad by Kenji Miyazawa, which is a really famous children's story in Japan, as well as anime film. You might have seen it. It's got cats. And I liked it. I liked it. It wasn't the best of Moto Hagio's work, but that I've read, but it was good. I mean, any Moto Hagio is gonna be good Moto Hagio. Then I was still in the Moto Hagio mood, so I got around to the second half of Otherworld Barbara, which I've been putting off reading for absolutely no reason for ever. This is dense. This is a lot. I posted on Twitter, there's like this bit in here where like the scientist is explaining like the concept of time travel, and the guy he's explaining it to is just like, he's like, don't keel over. And I'm like, I posted on Twitter, I was like, this is exactly the experience of reading Moto Hagio science fiction. She's got like so many ideas, and they all show up here, and I love it. There are a lot of parallels that I noticed thematically between this and Evangelion, as well as between this and Penguin Drum. There's a lot of themes of like family, of what it means to be blood related to somebody as opposed to who you choose on your own, which are not foreign themes to Hagio, but I really enjoyed how they were explored here. There's themes of cloning and time travel and genetics, if you're into that hard science fiction, which this definitely is. But for me, the most interesting stuff is always the relationships between her characters. And I'm just fascinated by this character here, the son, and his relationship with the comatose girl, Aoba, and his relationship with his father, who he is sort of estranged from, and just watching that all play out, and it ends... The way it ends was, it was very moving. It wasn't exactly happy, but it was very moving. And I just... This is so good. Please read this. This is also from Fantagraphics, so it's a beautiful, beautiful book. 2 volumes. They're gonna cost you a lot, but they're so good. I can't wait for the Poe Clan. I cannot wait. And then the last sort of print book that I read was this one, which is called Suiton Kiko by Komatsu Shinya. So I was wondering where I'd seen his art before, and then I remembered it's in a story in Axe Alternative Manga. He is in that book. So yeah. But this I bought at a book off a while ago. It was like $1 or something. And I just thought the art was really charming and really interesting. And it's basically what you would assume just flipping through it. It's a very whimsical collection of stories in a very whimsical world. where things don't make a lot of sense, but there's a lot of really fun and cute, like, visual concepts. I liked this story about this. They're trying to find this dragon in the desert. And there's this one about this kid who used to be obsessed with, like, I don't remember, trains or something, but then he gets obsessed with growing mushrooms, and his little mushroom garden ends up overtaking the city. And it's just really cute and whimsical, and it's really well drawn and really uniquely drawn, and I enjoyed this quite a bit. I've been putting it off because I'm never in the mood for something quite this whimsical, but this day I was in the mood for something quite this whimsical, so it hit the spot. The last book that I read, coffee break. The last book that I read was a ebook, and this was volume 7 of Perfect World, which I had been putting off for a little bit because that series is so good, but it just tears me apart emotionally every time I read it, and this was no exception. The last couple volumes dipped in quality for me as it focuses a little too much on the romantic rivals. I always hate that. I hate love triangles. They're exasperating. And it's like, especially in this series where it's like you have this really interesting story about, you know, this man with a disability, which you so hardly see in manga. And I'm just like, I don't really care about this, like, generic josei manga romantic rival garbage. But where it went with it in this volume, made me kind of retroactively forgive most of it. And this definitely went back to, like, the core couple. They're, spoilers, they're not together right now, but, you know, we get more scenes with them together, which I've been waiting for volumes for, and we really get into sort of some hazards of having a physical disability in a non-accessible society that you might not think about if you're not a person with a disability. And that stuff was really interesting. It was really tense. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. And then when we finally get these two characters who have been separated for several volumes together, having, like, conversations again, it was, like, so much. And then the ending, the cliffhanger at the ending, just, like, I have to have volume 8, like, yesterday, and I have to wait for it, and I'm so angry. This is such a good josei series. Please check it out. And then after that, I was tired, so I thought about reading one more volume, but I was too tired, so I stopped. But I don't know, somebody on Twitter must have reminded me of how much I love Yuri on Ice, so I did decide to go ahead and reread these two doujinshi that I happen to own that I really like. This one is called Nijiiro Anata, Rainbow Colored You. And it's really cute, and it takes place, I believe, after the series when they're in off-season and Yuri goes to visit Victor in Russia for the first time. You know, like his house and stuff. And they, like, pick raspberries and gaze up at the stars, and it's really cute. I just really live for victory doujinshi that are, like, fluffy but also get the characters down really well. And I think that this one accomplishes that. And so does this one. This one is R18, so there is some smut in this one. But it's really well written. Like, the characters are just on point for how they're supposed to be, and yeah, it's really cute. This is Hokorobi no Saki no Kimi o ou. I don't know how I would translate that. It's like chasing the you at your breaking point. Hokorobi is like a ripped seam. Hokorobu is like to come apart at the seams. So obviously this is referring to his Yuri's anxiety breakdown in episode 7, and this is detailing like the night after the events of episode 7. And this one is assuming that they've been together before the kiss in episode 7. That like was far from a first kiss for them, which I'm down for. I buy it 110%. I don't think that was their first kiss or anything. So, yeah, I just really like how they're characterized in this, and the art's really nice. There's a really nice page. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, this is a nice page. I liked it. Yeah, it's also my favorite subset of Victory Dojinshi, where it's like what happened after episode 7 that we didn't see. That's my favorite subgenre of Victory Dojinshi, in case you were wondering. So that's what I read. I read these books, plus one ebook, and I think I did pretty well, especially considering how many, like, dense books I got through. So let me know in the comments what book I read interests you the most, what you read, if you participated in this readathon, and anything that you've read recently that you've been particularly enjoying. I'd really love to know. And I'll see you in the next video, whenever that is. See you later, guys. Bye.